We're on our last week of our series on family time. What time is it, Mr. Fox? We talked about the value of family time. We've talked about the value of supper time. I don't know, someone left me a metal plaque in the office, quote from Ronald Reagan, something about all great decisions made in America began around the supper table. There's powerful things that can happen there. We talked about me time. You have to take care of yourself before you're going to take care of others. And this morning, the thought that it's possible for us to be out of time. How many of you know that someday you're going to be out of time? You are not eternal on planet Earth. We're out of time is different than I didn't have enough time. I didn't have enough time is an excuse. You heard on the video, we all have 24 hours in a day. And I've tried to press my team to quit saying, well, I didn't have enough time. You have enough time to get everything God wants you to do finished. What we have to choose is how we budget our time for the things that we need to get done. And in reality, we need to say, when we say I didn't have enough time, either didn't value it enough to spend time on it, or I didn't with discretion spend my time in a way that I could get it done. But we all have enough time, 24 hours a day. There is a time coming that time shall be no more. Time for waiting will be over. Eternity is beyond time, and we look forward to that day that's coming our way. We say that we're living in the end times. That presupposes there is an end of time. Every time you talk about the last days or the end times, you are also saying that you're aware that time will come to an end, that we will be out of time. The Bible tells us that Jesus was born in the fullness of time. Paul describes himself as one born out of due season or born out of due time. So what does it mean to be out of time? The definition that's given actually says to have no more time to do or complete something. We ran out of time, it says, and didn't finish the project. How many have ever watched an interview go badly and the interviewer will say, oops, we're out of time, so they can move on in another direction? I don't know if you know this, but March 2023, the climate time bomb is ticking, and the UN warns that the world is running out of time to avoid a catastrophe. Now, I'm not talking about global warming, but there is a sense worldwide that we are headed to a place of being out of time in our world. How many of you are familiar with the doomsday clock? The doomsday clock is a representation of the likelihood of a man-made global catastrophe, and it's developed by the members of the Bulletin for Atomic Scientists who evaluate the clock every January. The 100 seconds to midnight is where the doomsday clock has been during 21 and 22, but on January 24th, 2023, the group moved the clock to 90 seconds, a minute and a half before midnight, meaning that the clock's current setting is the closest it has ever been to midnight since its inception in 1947. Now, I'm just saying to you that in secular realms, there's a recognition that time is being compressed and we're headed towards some kind of cataclysmic event. The move, the closest to widespread calamity that the world has ever seen, is judged to be so largely, though not exclusively, due to the war in Ukraine. And we can look at that as simply the oppression of one nation over another, but they see in that the potential for disaster that would impact the entire world. It seems to me that time is moving faster than when I started in ministry. Now, I know it's moving the same, but things are happening at an increasingly rapid rate. I don't know if you're aware of this. I'd be shocked if you were. But the time frame for mankind to move from the sailboat to the steamboat, from the sailboat to the invention of the steamboat, how long do you think? 5,000 years historically between the sailboat invention and the development of the steamboat. From the steamboat to the airplane was 100 years. From the airplane to satellites were 52 years. From the satellite to what's called the Star Wars defense was 25 years. We are moving rapidly towards something. And we need to be certain how we handle time, particularly in relationship to our families. As a family, there won't always be time. I heard a comedian say, when someone shows you a picture of themselves and they say, this is a picture of me when I was younger, every picture of you is when you were younger. Maybe a few seconds or a few minutes, but time doesn't stop. It keeps moving. And I know that in the middle of the night with a colicky baby that can't be comforted, it may seem as though time stands still. But I'll tell you from where I stand today, it seems like a whisper ago when my children were in kindergarten. I was looking at some old pictures of our kids when they were younger. And those kids are gone. I want to hold them again. I want to interact with them again. But those kids don't exist. And today, I can't invest in those kids. But I can invest in the kids that are here today. How many are hearing what I'm saying? We need to think about how we're using and how we're managing our time and how we can mismanage it. And probably the strongest realization I had of that was a number of years ago when we were pastoring in Ames. Our kids were little. They were younger, I should say. And my dad had retired and he was moving to La Crescent, Minnesota. And he called and said, hey, we're on our way to La Crescent from Cedar Rapids. And tomorrow morning, I want to stop by on our way and say hi to you. Now, if you look at a map, I know that doesn't make sense to go from Cedar Rapids to Ames to La Crescent. But that's what he said he was going to do. And I was looking forward to that. My wife was gone to a conference, and I had our children, our two kids at that time, I believe there were two, and I wanted to impress my dad. I was remodeling our basement, and I wanted to show him what a good job I'd done. I wanted my dad to be proud. So all day long, I'm telling the kids to go play, putting them in their room, putting food on the table, eat it. Almost out of it, no, not out of a dog dish, just giving them food, telling them to take care of themselves. And I'm working, putting them to bed, and I worked and I worked and I worked till about 2 a.m. I got it done. I looked around, I was satisfied, went to bed, and about 8 o'clock in the morning, the phone rang, and my dad said, we've changed our mind, we're going straight to La Crescent. Now, what did that do for me? It made me realize that I had spent my time wrongly. Is there anyone in the house? And I would never get that day back. I will never get that day back. I think there should be an urgency in the lives of Christians, and I don't want you to feel under any kind of guilt or load, and I'll clarify that in a little bit, but I don't think that we give the same stewardship recognition to our time that we should. How should we deal with that in reality? Number one, I'm going to suggest to you that every one of us needs to take time to prioritize our time, just like we should prioritize our money. How many know we should prioritize our money? 7 of you. The rest of you need to learn that. It will help you. How many know we need to prioritize our money? How many of you are impulse shoppers? Oh, there's more of you. I know that. How many of you know that you shouldn't grocery shop when you're hungry? My wife will tell you she should never grocery shop with me. We were walking through a store, and she was getting some things, and I saw bacon frosted maple cookies in a kit. And I wanted those. And I knew she wasn't going to say yes to that. I just knew she wouldn't. And I didn't want to have to come back later and get them on my own. So while she's getting something else, I slid it in the cart. And she's standing there. The mistake I made is I let her unload the cart. I should have insisted as a gentleman, I'll do this. And she lifts that out and she looks at the cashier and said, how did this get in here? And the cashier said, I don't know. And then they both looked at me. I knew how it got there. Impulse shopping will ruin your budget. Impulse shopping will ruin your finances. And I will tell you, the same thing will happen with impulse spending of your time. You will spend it and you can't get it back. You can't reinvest it. You can't use it again. The Bible tells us of a situation that I want you to consider in the sense of prioritizing. In Luke chapter 9, verses 56 to 62, Jesus is calling his disciples to follow him. Now that's a pretty important moment, isn't it? When Jesus says, follow me, how many of you would agree that's an important moment? Raise your hand if you're breathing. I'm just curious whether we need to have a healing line this morning. And he says, as they were walking along the road, watch this, a man said to Jesus, I will follow you wherever you go. He approached Jesus and said, I will follow you anywhere. And Jesus responds by saying, foxes have holes, the birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. And we have no indication that that man followed him at all. He came to Jesus. Jesus told him the reality, and he chose not to follow. He said to another man, follow me. But the man replied, Lord, first let me go and bury my father. And Jesus says something that seems to be harsh. Let the dead bury their own dead, but you go and proclaim the kingdom of God. Still another said, I will follow you, Lord, but first let me go back and say goodbye to my family. And Jesus replied, no one who puts his hand to the plow and looks back is fit for service in the kingdom of God. When you are called to follow Jesus, following Jesus needs to be your time priority. It needs to be the first direction that you go. Let's walk back through this story. I will follow you anywhere is a boast that many Christians make. When we call ourselves a Christ follower, we're saying that we will prioritize our time, talent, and treasure to follow him. I will follow you right now. I'm with you until we understand what it will cost of us. No creature comforts, sacrifice. All of a sudden my boast goes away. Follow me, let me go and bury my father, let the dead bury the dead. I don't know if you've read that before, but that seems kind of intense. It was the responsibility of the firstborn in a Jewish household to make sure that funeral arrangements were made for the father. It was his responsibility. But there's nothing in Scripture that indicates the father had died. He basically is saying, when my father dies, then I will follow you. But I have to stay there until my father dies, and then I will follow you. And it also implies that if his father is dead, that Jesus isn't going to supply for him an opportunity to go back. Jesus isn't heartless. He cares about families. But I will tell you, this man made a choice that it was more important to spend his time at home until his father died so that he would get the inheritance than it was to follow Jesus. The third story is another disciple who indicates a desire to follow. And he says, let me go back and say goodbye to my family. And that indicates a lack of trust that there would never be an opportunity. And Jesus replied, no one who puts his hand to the plow and looks back is fit for service in the kingdom of God. Once you decide to invest your time, your energy, your focus, your direction, you need to follow that. But if you're going to go back and do something else, you haven't prioritized the time in the present. You've prioritized going home and saying goodbye as more important than following Jesus. He wants us to see something about how we prioritize our time. May have been good reasons to delay, may have been good responses, but you have to ask yourself, the biggest tension in investing my time is when two important things come into conflict. Not which one is most important to which one, viewing it as which has more value is where you will invest your time. And as a family, we need to consider that. What is most important in your life? What is priority in your life? Then invest your time to reflect that. Invest your time to reflect that. Now, I'm going to give you an illustration that seems contrary. For one summer, I was a coach of a Little League team. There were two of us co-coaching a Little League team. And the commitment was there would be no ball games on a Wednesday night. And I will tell you that sports doesn't honor their commitments. They just don't, because it's more important to get the games in than it is to honor what you said. And so a particular Wednesday had come up, and on other Wednesdays, we hadn't been there. The coach was going to be there. And so I need you to hear two things. I believe in putting value in Sunday morning and Wednesday night, but the biblical emphasis on Wednesday night is not the same as the biblical emphasis on Sunday morning. It's not the same. And we provide that. And I had established a pattern for our family, and everyone knew that we valued that. But on this particular Wednesday, the other coach had a commitment to be out of town that he had no choice but to follow that and do what his job required, which meant if I didn't show up, there was no coach and the kids couldn't play. They would forfeit, and parents who were looking to us to honor our commitment wouldn't have been there to do that. So this may shock you in what I've just said, but I made arrangements for someone else to do Wednesday night, and I coached Little League that night. Because at that moment, I felt like my commitment to the parents I was serving was high enough to invest that priority and had established a pattern. You see, that wasn't our pattern, that was an exception to the pattern. Come on, help me somebody. It wasn't the pattern, it was an exception to the pattern. I don't see Wednesday night as biblically essential as Sunday morning. That's another conversation. So I'm not saying to you that how you should prioritize your time. I'm saying there are moments that will happen again and again and again, and you have to decide where you're going to put the priority, what you're going to say is most important, and that will show not by what you say, but where you invest your time. Is anybody hearing me right now? So I'm not trying to play the heavy hand. I'm saying to you, you need to weigh over. You need to weigh over where you're going to invest your time. Is your faith walk a matter of convenience or a matter of commitment? Is your time with your family a matter of convenience or a matter of commitment? If you value your family, if you value your spouse, if you value your children, you will invest time in them as a priority now, because it'll be gone tomorrow. Is anybody hearing me right now? Oh, there are times. I'll give you a couple more, because it looks like you're not quite getting it. I had an opportunity to speak at a missions conference in Turkey. Now, I'm telling you, that lit my fire. I was invited. I'm going to go to Turkey and speak to missionaries. You've got to be kidding me. The answer to that is yes. And then I looked at the dates. And my daughter was going to be crowned, or actually receive a recognition, a gold medal at a girls' event, and she wanted me to be there. And so I did the math, and my flight from Turkey would get me in on Friday with the medal award on Saturday. How many of you know that the likelihood I would get back on Friday with an overseas flight from Turkey is a snowball's chance in July in Iowa. And I prayed about it. I tried to get God to change his mind. God, you offered, the kingdom, missions, it's our heartbeat. I want to do that. And God said, your daughter will never remember what you did in Turkey, but she will remember whether or not you're there when she gets her medal. I'm talking about prioritizing your time. One more example. I haven't always done this well, but I'm not going to tell you where I failed this morning. There are more of those. But to illustrate the wins, this may shock you, and I get that, but please allow me to just kind of enjoy this story for a little bit. Early in ministry, when we were pastoring, doors opened for me to preach in other places. And I'm going to tell you a fact. Pastor Tim, you know this is true. The further you are from home, the better preacher you are. You know what an expert is? It's a guy with a briefcase 100 miles from his house. And so I was getting opportunities to preach around the Midwest, other places, and those doors were opening. And I had a call from 2 pastors in Texas. They wanted to do back-to-back weeks, and I was so excited. These doors are opening. It's got to be God, right? It's got to be God. I mean, people need my influence. They need to hear my word. I tell you what, God's opened the door for me to travel. And I talked to my wife about that. And she said, we need to make a decision. I thought you made a commitment to be a pastor when we got married, not an evangelist. Which one are you going to be? Because we need you here more than they need you there. And so I canceled out about it. And you know what happens, Tim, when you do that? They quit calling. They quit calling when you start saying no. Why did I do that? Because I wanted it was hard for me. The other fed my ego. Come on, help me, somebody. You know what I'm talking about. The other fed my ego, but my choice fed my spirit. And you have to decide where you're going to prioritize your time. And for you to spend it here means you can't spend it here. You have to prioritize your time. Second, we will give an account for our time. In Psalm chapter 90, verse 12, what is commonly a funeral verse, prayer of Moses, the man of God, Lord, you've been our dwelling place throughout all generations before the mountains were born. Or you brought forth the earth and the world from everlasting to everlasting, your God. You turn men back to dust, saying, return to dust, O men, for 1,000 years in your sight are like a day that has just gone by, or watch the knife. You sweep men away in the sleep of death. They're like new grass in the morning. Though by morning it springs up, and by evening it is dry and withered. You're consumed by your anger, terrified by your indignation. You have set our iniquities before you, our secret sins in the light of your presence. As our days pass away under your wrath, we will finish our years with a moan. The length of our days is 70 years, or 80 if we have the strength. Yet their span is but trouble and sorrow, for they quickly pass and we fly away. Who knows the power of your anger? Teach us to number our days. When you're 19, you're 10 foot tall and bulletproof. And then you realize, as you get older, that you don't recover from injuries as quickly. That you can't do what you once did. And your temporal, finite nature becomes part of every morning when you get out of bed. We are not going to be here forever. And I can't do anything about my family or my neighbors or my friends after I'm dead. It has to be done while I'm alive. And I believe that we will give an account to God for everything that we've done. We shall all give an account to God. But I also believe in that we'll be giving an account for how we have spent our time. A funeral should teach us to number our days. So I want to suggest to you a couple of things to think about. If we're going to give an account for our time, you have no right to kill time. What are you doing right now? Just killing time. You'll give an account to God for that. What are you doing today? Oh, just wasting time. You'll give an account to God for that. When I was in Bible college, I was preaching, and it beat me up. Killing time, wasting time. If every idle word and every idle thing that we say will be held in account, every idle minute will be accounted for as well. So let me suggest to you, you say, do you mean that every minute of my life has to be ordered and structured and doing something productive? Not at all. Because how many of you know that you do need downtime? How many know you do need time to rest? How many of you know you do need time to do nothing? How many of you ever go fishing hoping to not catch anything? Yes. But that's not wasting, that's not killing, that's not throwing it away. It is intentionally recognizing that I need some time to recharge, to refuel. And I'm not haphazardly just doing nothing. I'm choosing for my health to take some time to relax, to not be productive, so that I can be more productive later. The man who never takes time to sharpen his axe will ultimately never be able to cut down trees. You have to take time to sharpen the axe. So I'm suggesting that we should take time to steward our time. And I don't know anyone that does it any better in stewarding time that could be wasted, that could be time that is being used unnecessarily, is Disney World. Those lines are too long. But have you ever noticed how hard they work to steward that time, to make your time in line an experience, not just a waiting in place? They're trying to create a feeling that you are doing something productive while in line. I'll never forget, Avery wanted me to take her on It's a Small World. It's a small world after all. You will sing that for the rest of your life once you go through that ride. And others were doing something else. And I love to go on Small World for a couple of reasons. It's air conditioned. I don't get car sick. And I can sleep through the ride. It was long. I have no idea why anybody would wait an hour to do Small World at Disney. I have no idea. But we're in line, and we've been in line for a good 30, 40 minutes, and we're about halfway through, and she said, Poppy, I've changed my mind. I don't want to do this. And I said, wrong, child. I've invested the amount of time to get this far. We're going all the way. Don't ask Poppy if you don't want to get there. I'm not wasting 30 minutes. I've invested 30 minutes, and we're going to get the value out of this because it was getting really hot, and I wanted to get inside. I'm suggesting to you that we need to give an account for our time, how we spend it, how we use it, to steward our time. I'm not trying to turn you into some nerd machine that's looking for some game to play with every second of the day. But I am saying that children need downtime, and we need to steward that. Let them have that. We need to organize and steward it, that all of our time has recognized value and is spent on purpose, because we will give an account to God. We'll give an account to God. We need to prioritize our time and recognize that we'll give an account for how we spend our family time. So third, lastly, make the most of your time. We need to prioritize it, we need to account for it, and then we need to make the most of it. Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity, because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be foolish, and understand what the will of the Lord is. How many are with me so far? Don't be foolish and understand what the will of the Lord is. Now watch. Here's what foolish is. Getting drunk on wine. Do not get drunk on wine, which leads to debauchery. Instead, be filled with the Spirit. So he's telling us that drunkenness and being Spirit-filled are exact opposites. Do not be drunk with wine, but be filled with the Spirit, speaking to one another with psalms, hymns, spiritual songs. Sing and make music in your heart to the Lord, always giving thanks to God the Father for everything in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, and to submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. So the King James uses the word redeem. Think about this. The word redeeming the time, rather than just make the most of every opportunity, redeem the time. In other words, buy it back or rescue it from loss. It means that by payment of a price to recover from the power of another, to ransom or to buy off, to make wise and sacred use of every opportunity for doing good. That there is time that the devil wants to steal from you and cause you to use it in an unhealthy way, and we need to be able to buy it back, to redeem it, to bring it back from loss. Who is the power that wants to waste your time? Evil days, foolishness, drunkenness, unthankfulness, rebellion will steal your time. But we're called to buy it back. Evil days, we need to be wise. Foolishness, we need to know the will of God. Don't get drunk. Be filled with the Spirit. Give thanks for everything. And submit to God, because striving with people is a waste of time. I had an experience last night, and some of you are going to take this as a political statement. This is not a political statement. It's an illustration of people redeeming the time. I'm on my way home from the office. It's about 9:15, something like that. Was here last night, always am on Saturdays. It's my quiet time with God and time to just seek Him for the morning. And one of the things that Pastor Booth taught me, whether it's valid or not, was to never, never, never have an empty tank of gas on Saturday night, because you never know what will happen on Sunday. And I looked and I had about a quarter of a tank, and I thought, I'm going to fill that up. And I was going to stop at one place and thought, no, I think it'll be cheaper over here. I went to the other one. It was a nickel higher, but by the time I'd gone back, I'd have spent the nickel. And so I get out, and I'm putting gas in my car. And this doesn't matter, but usually people don't talk to each other. They don't interact with each other. And an African-American man, throwing some stuff away, spoke to me, said hi. That was great. We had a brief conversation. And then another man walks over to me, Caucasian man walks over, they're traveling together, and he said, would you sign this card to help our candidate get on the Republican ballot? It's 9:30 at night in a gas station parking lot. And I thought, so understand, this isn't political, I'm just saying to you, I don't care who gets on the ballot. Let's put everybody on the ballot. Put me on the ballot. Put you on the ballot. I don't care who gets on the ballot. You have to evaluate and vote. So this was not an endorsement. And they said the only thing that you have to do is you have to make a cash donation. I said, how much? 2 pennies. The National Regulatory Commission requires a donation of at least 2 cents. Well, I can do that. And then I recognized who they were, and they were at this event here in Des Moines, and they were outside giving away T-shirts for a donation to sign a card. And so I'm standing there, and they gave me a T-shirt. I signed the card. I gave them a little bit of a donation, and not an endorsement at all. I found it amazing. Do you know what happened in that moment? Here are 2 guys who are traveling with a job. And they responded to an opportunity. I was one more card out of the thousands that they need. Why would they take time without a crowd? One person, only one option that has a 50-50 chance of going sideways. Why would they do that, take that moment? Because they understood what it meant to redeem the time. Here was an opportunity. Make the most of every opportunity. And I felt smitten. God, how many times have I missed an opportunity to ask someone if they want to sign their name on the roll that'll be read in heaven? How many times have I missed an opportunity to redeem the time? Now, I am not advocating, nor will I walk around parking lots at 9:30 at night asking people if they want to meet Jesus. But I do want to be aware for moments that could pass and redeem them. And that includes our family. Are you hearing me? Yes. Redeeming time with our family, buying it back. And there are times where I can't do everything with my family in the younger years that I wanted to do in that moment, but I could plan ahead to buy that back, to redeem that time and reinvest that in my family. I believe that we should give flowers before the funeral. I believe at the funeral too. It says something to the family. I heard someone say, do you know what I want people to say at my funeral? No, what do you want them to say at your funeral? I want someone to walk up to the casket and say, look, he's still breathing. Because they're not going to hear your compliments after that. They'll hear them today. I know that there are tensions in the home. I know there are tensions in the family. I know that children can be brats. But I also know you have the ability out of that turmoil to buy the time back. You can redeem the time. You can reclaim the time. So my challenge to you, church, is that we would develop a sense of urgency for our families. If we really do believe that families matter, then recognize that we're going to be out of time. Oh, how I wish. Oh, how I wish I could take my firstborn and come back in the house again after work, lay him on my chest, and the two of us take a nap before supper. Oh, I'd love to do that again. But I can't because he's already in heaven. How I wish I could wrap one of my girls up in a little blanket and sit in the rocker and sing Itsy Bitsy Spider to them again. But I can't. Come on, I can't. Those days are gone. So please hear me. One day you're going to be out of time. You have time now. Look at how you're spending it. Is this how you want to spend it? Is this how you want to use it? Rather, let's prioritize our time, give an account for our time, and then redeem the time because the days are evil. God help us. Would you stand with me? And let's just spend a moment in his presence.